Persephone and Cassandra, Atlas and Prometheus, oligarchy, plutocracy, satire, irony, hubris, nemesis, pathos, catharsis, sour grapes and blowing hot and cold, opening Pandora's box and leaving no stone unturned, the myths, tales and concepts of ancient Greece echo and reach into every aspect of modern life. Often misunderstood, frequently romanticised, and sometimes deliberately twisted. To understand their origins and truth is to get a real glimpse into the universal themes that connect us to the past and to each other. This is their story.
Άμα θέλεις μάνα δίρε με, άμα θέλεις μάνα δίρε με, πάλι εγώ θα βγαίνω στην αυλή για να βλέπω τον Αλεξανδρή.
Welcome to Podyssey. I'm Alexandrou. Each time we take one myth, one concept, person, place, theme from ancient Greece, take it apart, figure out its inner workings, trace its tentacles, juice it for wisdom, update, reconfigure and put it back together all shiny and new. Sisyphus, condemned to an eternity of torment, forever rolling that giant boulder up the steepest mountainside, only to watch it roll back down as soon as it is almost at the top. His Sisyphean task, seen for millennia by so many artists and philosophers as the perfect allegory for the human condition. Most know the sentence, but how many know the crime? What is Sisyphus being punished for? The short answer is for being human. The long answer is revealing, funny, profound, and very, very surprising. And now, without further ado, it is time to welcome to the stage the man responsible for turning this startup into the economic miracle that it is, the son of Thessaly that Homer himself describes as the craftiest of men, the mortal who married a goddess, the king of Corinth himself. Put your hands together for Sisyphus! The crowd inside the Corinth amphitheatre goes wild. A man in his late 30s takes to the stage. His chiton is simple and functional. His sandals are plain but comfortable. There is no fancy royal gold embroidery, no Tyrian purple himation, and no crown or diadem. He is average in height, lean, unremarkable, except when he looks at you. There's a fire in those green eyes that turns a 4 into a 7. He walks up to the only other thing on stage, a plinth with a cloth over it, and waits for the audience to go quiet. The acoustics are superb, allowing him to speak at the same volume he would if chatting to a friend. They said it couldn't be done, he opens. His wife, Queen Merope, in the Paraskinia, silently mouths every word. They have rehearsed together. In that moment, the nymph daughter of Atlas, granddaughter of the ocean, the 7th Pleiad, shunned by her sisters for marrying a mortal, feels totally vindicated. On that stage, her husband is a god. They said don't be a fool, he goes on, letting the words breathe like a tele-evangelist. Corinthian mud is too brittle, they said. Attic orange is the lightest colour baked clay can be. You cannot make a tablet this thin, they said. Well, you know what I say. Here's to the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. Here's to Corinth! With a flourish, he pulls the cloth off to reveal a beautifully delicate amphora, gleaming with a yellow that seemed as near to gold as clay could get. It is unlike anything anyone has seen before. The audience gasps. The founder of Corinth, a city that seemed itself impossible, clinging to the edge of the land as it overhangs the sea, drinks in their astonishment. Sisyphus loves a challenge the way poets love metaphors. I will take some questions from the Kerikes now, he says, turning to a small media enclosure in the diazomer, teeming with heralds, envoys, poets and dramatists. Yes.
How long will this prototype take to reach commercial volumes?
A workshop is already hard at work, he tells the friendly plant. Early focus groups put the price point at considerable premium to Attic pottery. We expect to be selling these at volume by the next Isthmian Games in the spring, which will be attended by delegations from every major city-state. As you know, their souvenirs will be our advertising campaign. Within 18 months, we expect market penetration from Thrace to Crete. Yes.
Prosperity makes enemies. How do you plan to protect Corinth?
Protected? Our Acropolis is practically unassailable.
Unassailable it may be, but it's also vulnerable to a siege, seeing as there is no source of fresh water within the walls.
I'm glad you asked. Sisyphus is not glad, but does not show his annoyance. I have a solution and will be making an announcement next month.
What kind of solution?
No spoilers. Last question, yes. The moment he points, he knows it's a mistake. The old man who stands up is a mediocre but poisonous orator who enjoys the patronage of Sisyphus's brother come nemesis, Salmonius. Here comes trouble.
Can you confirm rumours that another 2 of your prize cattle disappeared overnight?
I've been rather busy with this launch to pay attention.
That makes 8 this month alone, does it not? Meanwhile, I understand the herd of your neighbouring ruler, Autolycus, is swelling in numbers.
Well, it's easy for you artistic types to make accusations, but a ruler needs proof.
How can you protect the people in this city if you cannot guard your own livestock?
Thank you for coming. Enjoy the wine and the hors d'oeuvre. The oxymelon is particularly good. And don't forget to take home a piece of the Itrian, the honey and sesame cake with you. 1 piece only, mind, and I'm looking at the lyric poets quite deliberately. Everyone laughs. Sisyphus makes a hasty exit. As he walks past Queen Merope, she offers, I think it went brilliantly, darling. But he is furious. To the crows with that old coprophagus! I'm going for a walk. Darling, it's starting to rain. I don't care. I need to clear my head. The most vexing thing, of course, is that the old donkey is right. For weeks he has been trying to catch that thief Autolycus in the act, but to no avail. His spies report that the god Hermes himself, rumoured to be Autolycus's real father, is protecting him by granting him a spell that can change the skin of any animal as if it were a tunic. By the time his beautiful long-haired white and golden brown heifers make it into Autolycus's farm, they are slick black aurochs. Any paint or branding is gone. Sisyphus' philosophy has always been move fast and break legs. But what is he meant to do? Start a war on a whim? It's really pouring now, so he heads for the palace. His sandal sinks into a muddy puddle. Well, this is terrific, isn't it? He tells nobody in particular. He scrapes as much as he can off, but as he walks up the marble steps, he still leaves prints of distinct yellow Corinth clay, like some filthy cattle thief. Sisyphus stops, as if in a trance. His eyes look a little unfocused, like they are not really looking, but composing some inner storyboard. Those who know him recognize this state. He has an idea. At one point his hand reaches up to the iron brooch on his shoulder. It is in the shape of his initial. His fingers trace the letter sigma, like a capital M tipped on its side. He wakes up from his transfixion and smiles. He makes his way to the palace forge and instructs his herdsmen to round up the cattle right away, even though it's nowhere near sunset. The next morning, Sisyphus and Merope are having breakfast. Thick-set yogurt with figs, walnuts, and Corinthian heather honey, when one of the farm's overseers comes in breathless. "It's happened again, boss. 3 this time. We don't know how he does it." "That's okay, I'll be down in a moment." Merope notices that her husband is smirking. "That's interesting," she says. "What is?" "Usually by this point you're swearing the air blue and threatening to fire everyone. What are you up to?" "When you were a child, did you used to scratch your initials on the underside of your toys?" "Oh, yes. I have 6 sisters. Until pretty recently I had to scratch my initials on the underside of my boyfriend's. What are you up to?" "Maybe nothing. Let me finish these figs and we'll check it out together." When Sisyphus arrives at the stead, 3 farmhands excitedly and at the same time try to explain which animals have been taken. One of them seems particularly heartbroken about a cow called Aglaia. Sisyphus doesn't seem to be listening. He's more preoccupied with the mud beginning to crust in the field just outside. He spots something, hunches over. "Time to finish this," he mutters. By midday, the nearest priest of Themis has been summoned. They are very well respected and act as a sort of local magistrate. Themis is the goddess who dispenses justice, you see. Ignore her, and you get to deal with Nemesis, who metes out a sort of summary sentence. Along with a small unit of elite guards and a lot of curious townspeople in tow, they head from Corinth to Autolycus' keep. Sisyphus walks with the cleric, occasionally stopping and pointing to the ground, whispering to him. The news reaches Autolycus before the delegation does, of course, so by the time they arrive, he is waiting for them with a priest of Hermes and an elite unit of his own. "King Sisyphus, your holiness," Autolycus exclaims. "What an honour this is! How can I help?" "King Autolycus, gosh, this is embarrassing, but I think some of my cattle must have got mixed up with yours. You know what cows are like, always wandering off." "Oh, I'd love to help, but I don't think so. We are very strict about our single origin products. We are even in the process of registering for PTO status. I only have black aurochs here. I would have noticed any of your lovely brown beasts. Feel free to have a look." "Thanks. I think we will." Just as Autolycus said, only black aurochs can be seen in the barn or yard. But it isn't hard to spot 3 animals that seem spooked, cowering in a corner. Sisyphus lifts the left hind leg of one and smiles. "Do you etch your cattle's hooves with my initials for some reason, Autolycus?" Sisyphus asks, pointing to a discreet but very clear sigma. Silence. Awkwardness. The 2 men ogle each other. The 2 priests ogle each other. The 2 elite units ogle each other. The priest of Hermes leans into Autolycus and whispers something. "I am mortified. I've no idea how this could have happened. Some overzealous farmhand with access to magic, perhaps. A mischievous local nymph? I should have noticed. But as you know, my daughter is getting married to King Laertes of Ithaca in 3 days. So much to plan. I'm certain we can avoid any unpleasantness. Why don't we step into the palace to discuss compensation over a spot of lunch?
Why don't we indeed? Sisyphus finally broke the tension. So, your daughter is getting hitched in 3 days.
That's right.
Does that mean she's free tonight?
The next day, Sisyphus travels back to Corinth with a sizable herd of white and brown cows that mysteriously appeared overnight. The king of Corinth's reputation for brains grows and spreads. Queen Merope seems a little colder and more distant. Has gossip of that night reached her ears?
He can outwit a god, people begin to whisper quietly.
A dangerous accolade.
Too clever by halves, some whisper even more quietly.
From that point on, the gods, Hermes especially, begin to keep a closer eye on Sisyphus. This is very much strike 1. Strike 2 comes relatively soon after. News reaches Sisyphus that Zeus has abducted Aegina, the naiad daughter of the river Asopus, who is livid. That seems quite monetizable, Sisyphus thinks to himself. He posts a few well-placed watchmen and waits. That's the thing about Corinth, you see. Controlling that tiny strip of land everyone needs to cross means you can keep tabs on everyone's movements. The city's 2 exports are pottery and information. And sure enough, within a couple of days, Aegina is spotted being smuggled to a small island across the water, which in time will come to be called by her name. Her father, the river god Asopus, is also not hard to find. All one needs to do is follow the trail of flooded towns and drowned sheep. Sisyphus sends word and arranges a meeting.
Who are you? I'm very busy.
Asopus burbles. I'm King Sisyphus of Corinth.
Good for you. What do you want?
The transparent water entity is getting impatient. I may have information about your daughter.
What does that mean? Do you or don't you?
I may even know where she is right now.
You may know. Are you not sure?
Rivers are pretty literal deities. No, okay, I do know. But information has value.
If you don't see it, I don't have it.
I'm certain we can come to some arrangement.
I am a river. All I have is water.
That'll do just fine. I want a freshwater spring inside the city walls. Permanent, plentiful, drinkable, continuous, no small print.
Deal. Speak.
The city celebrates and Sisyphus' legendary status explodes. Merope is less sure. Gods are very good at keeping score, and they do not like to lose. Oh, her mother warned her not to marry beneath her, but what she fell in love with was precisely his humanity. The more his ego inflates, the smaller a component that humanity seems. Maybe all women marry beneath them. Now, you might think that telling on the king of the gods would result in pretty immediate retribution, a strongly worded lightning bolt, perhaps. But Zeus had to be a bit more careful when he was essentially in the wrong. Otherwise, Hera would find out, take Sisyphus aside, then it escalates to gods against goddesses. Eventually, someone flings a mountain and the whole thing gets out of control. But knowing Hermes already had it in for our entrepreneur after the Autolycus episode, he can arrange something a bit more discreet. A heart attack in a couple of months, or some sort of rampaging wild boar, or a snake bite. Yeah, let's do the snake bite. But Sisyphus is not the kind of man who sees anything as non-negotiable. He considers mortality very much a solvable problem. When he gets to the underworld, he makes his case to Queen Persephone, who is minding the shop that day, and somehow ends up being given a reprieve.
You did what?
Hades says that evening. Oh, husband, it was like a hypnotic state, Persephone explains. He just talked and talked and talked until not only his request made perfect sense, not only was it obviously the right thing, but seemed to have been my idea. That man could sell trousers to a centaur. By the way, we are also now the proud owners of a complete Corinthian pottery dinner set. When Zeus finds out, he does a full-on nectar spit take. He decides to take out all middlemen and calls for Thanatos, the actual personification of death, born of Nyx, the night, and no father, twin brother to Sleep, winged, merciless, inexorable. Zeus gives Thanatos unbreakable chains made by Hephaestus that even a god could not escape from, and instructs him to drag Sisyphus to Hades and chain him to Tartarus, a sort of VIP area reserved only for those who commit the most heinous crimes imaginable, like mass poisoning or cannibalism or inventing molecular gastronomy. Cut to Sisyphus talking very fast again. Cut to Thanatos having a few drinks with Sisyphus because doesn't everyone deserve one last hurrah? Cut to Thanatos a little worse for wear, arguing with Sisyphus.
Yes, they do. They do show work on gods as well. I'll show you.
Cut to Sisyphus' palace basement. Thanatos in magical chains, hungover, trying to remember what the safe word was.
Please release me, let me go.
Taking death hostage, however, rather ups the stakes. Nobody would die. Nobody could die. Old men's families, gathered around beds, look at each other wondering if someone should open the shop. Robbers swear at passers-by hanging from trees like malevolent piñatas. Dejected lovers under bridges sit on the riverbed and look at each other awkwardly, mouthing, "Do you know what's going on?"
New love, dear, and I'll always want her near.
Worst of all, every battle turns into a giant Monty Python sketch. Just a flesh wound. Warriors stood there, throats slit, limbs missing, unsure what to do next. Ares, god of combat, is not having this. This is ridiculous. Everything is a draw. Nobody can win. What is the point of war if nobody can win? He decides to take matters into his own hands. He frees Thanatos and personally drags Sisyphus to Hades. But our anti-hero is nothing if not a planner. He has given strict instructions to Queen Merope not to conduct any kind of funeral rites. No libation, no offerings, no prayers, no coin in the mouth, nada.
I don't love you anymore. To live together
When he arrives in the underworld, it is mayhem. The queues are miles long. Thousands of people, you see, backed up for weeks, died at precisely the same moment. It's like Thorpe Park during half-term. A queue to get in, a queue to ride Charon's ferry, a queue to see Persephone's gardens, a queue to have your picture taken with Cerberus, a queue to drink at Lethe, after which you don't even remember having done any of the rides. Luckily, Ares sends quite a lot of business this way and can cut queues. He sends word of Sisyphus' readmittance to the Dark Palace and asks it be handled personally.
Why don't you let me handle him?
Hades tells Persephone smugly.
Considering what happened last time.
Okay, Persephone agrees. But be careful, it's not as easy as you think.
I promise to be careful, my love. I did run this place long before she got here.
He thinks silently as he makes his way to the great hall.
We're still paying for the pottery set. I mean, who needs 4 different kinds of Kylix for Pythia's sake?
I begged her not to get the full Kylix set, you know, Sisyphus says when Hades walks in, as if he can read minds. Queens, right? They never listen.
Tell me about it.
Splendid job on the gardens, by the way. I hope she appreciates the effort.
Well, I wouldn't mind hearing it once in a while.
Still, I can see you love her very much.
I do. Absolutely.
And every marriage has its problems.
Of course it does.
Take my wife, for instance. The sacrifices I have made for that woman, the sleepless nights wondering, am I good enough?
Oh my God, yes.
And right at the end, she turns around and just dumps my body in the street.
No.
Yep, no funeral rites, no offerings, not even a coin in my mouth.
Not even a coin?
Nope. Which means, of course, I shouldn't even be here, strictly speaking. But I suppose rules don't really matter in a place like this.
Oh, no. Let me correct you. Rules matter, especially in a place like this.
Oh, dear. Oh, I'm sorry about that. What I wouldn't give to be able to nip back up there and scare the Orpheus out of her, scold her, shame her, rebuke her into doing her duty. But it can't be done. I just hope word doesn't get out to other ungrateful spouses, that they don't really need to do any of it, or I can see your coin coffers running dry pretty quickly.
No coins?
No coins.
We can't have that.
You wouldn't fool me, would you? You shouldn't fool me, should you?
As Sisyphus legs it out of Hades again, he can just about hear the royal quarrel escalating in the distance behind him. You did what?
He gave me his word.
He's not coming back.
I looked into the man's eyes. I think I would know if I was being conned.
Then make me wish I'd never known ya. You wouldn't fool me, would you?
When word reaches Zeus, he just pinches the bridge of his nose like a headmaster of a private boys' school who wakes up to find the entire gymnasium building wrapped in toilet paper. Thanatos refuses to go back point blank. He still has PTSD of that basement. Ares doesn't care as long as Thanatos is doing his job. Even Hermes advised that maybe they should quit while slightly behind, before cheating death becomes a TikTok trend. They can always take care of the matter at a later date. And so Sisyphus lives happily ever after, or at least what counts as ever after for mortals. He tells of Hades at dinner parties, embellishing the details for dramatic effect. Every few years he thinks, that seems quite monetizable. He goes on to invent the Corinthian column, the Greek salad, but really he just added the cheese, shipping insurance, the alarm clock, and air soles for sandals. Until decades later, having guided Corinth to prosperity and fame, he dies a contented old man. His mistake is to think that just because a lifetime has passed for him, the gods will have mellowed similarly. But a human lifetime to an eternal is but a moment. It is later that day. It is almost meanwhile. It is the blink of an eye. And when he finally goes back to Hades, they have planned something very special. They are all gathered there waiting for him.
You are willing to break everything in exchange for a little more time,
Hades says.
Mock the gods for a little extra life. Well, we have decided to reward you with more time, more life than any mortal before you. In fact, we are granting you eternity. But time without purpose is meaningless. Life involves struggle, toil.
Sisyphus is by now keenly aware that divine eyes looking at him are not filled with magnanimity, but with malevolence. He can hear the shifting of rock behind him. As he turns, he sees that he's at the foot of a mountain, the impossibly angled side of which stretches upwards without ever really resolving into anything comforting like a plateau. The air crackles with the heat of industry. An enormous boulder is rolling down the slope.
Da-da-da-dum, ba-ba-bum. Any time that rock sits at the top is yours to enjoy.
Before he has time to say a word, he braces for contact. Muscle meets rock. Sinews strain, tendons stretch. He pushes. The boulder shifts a little. He pushes again, a fraction of a rotation upwards. He finds a rhythm, gets into it. Hours turn to days. He pushes and props, rolls and rests. After a week, he can see the top. The gods really have underestimated him. A challenge is what he loves. After 2 days, the top seems precisely the same distance away. After another day, it appears to be further. Still, Sisyphus persists. You will not beat me. Eventually, maybe after 1 month, maybe 6, he gets to the top. The tip is perfectly rounded like a well-used pencil. He tries to find a dent in the rock into which it can slot. Nothing. He thinks to prop it. There's nothing to prop it with. He tries to find a balance. For a moment, it seems like he has. He holds his breath. Then the giant sphere slips. He tries to stop it, but gravity has no small print. It rolls and rolls until he can no longer see or hear it. In a flash, he's at the bottom of the mountain again, the boulder rolling towards him. He braces for contact. Muscle meets rock. Sinews strain, tendons stretch. He pushes. The boulder shifts a little. He pushes again, a fraction of a rotation upwards. He finds a rhythm. For the first 2 decades, maybe even 3, it's hard to tell, Sisyphus does what he always does. He plans, alters his grip, the route, the angle, the rhythm, swears like a man trying to put together an IKEA version of a Gaudi cathedral with no instructions, fills sacks with rocks to help as wedges at the top, tries to use rails, levers, makes a glue from spit and snot. Eventually he slips into a routine and loses track of time overall, while being aware of every individual moment, like a mechanical clock that counts each second, minute and hour with precision, but has no concept of how long it has done this for. Roughly halfway through his first millennium, he understands. Perhaps it's the absurdity of it, perhaps it's simply exhaustion, or perhaps it is the realization that there is no hack, no small print, no loophole, no angle. He understands that he is not meant to complete the task. It is designed to be impossible. But he pushes. There is nothing else to be done. He watches galaxies expand and collapse into giant black holes while he pushes. He's not sure whether the gods exist anymore. How many thousands of years has it been since he last saw anyone? Still, he pushes. His struggle softens. Time rubs the edges of his despair, smooth and round like his rock. Eventually he finds himself looking forward to the boulder rolling down. Gives it a push even at the top. Oh, that's a good one, he thinks. He finds meaning, even pleasure, in his repetitive, endless mission. This seems quite monetizable, he says out loud. I shall call it mindfulness.
I am just a rolling stone. I get the blues when I'm alone for some.
So now you know. But does knowing his crime justify the punishment? Does it explain it? Does it shift your thinking? Is it a punishment at all? There is one reading of the tale that might suggest Sisyphus actually cheated death, that he not only got exactly what he wanted, but made it seem like it was their idea.
That's rolling home again.
That figure of the man pushing the giant boulder up a mountain, the impossible task, The daily struggle of life has seeped into extraordinary aspects of our culture, from literature and philosophy to games and cartoons. It has come to represent the human condition. So it seems quite important to me to take a view on whether it signifies tortuous punishment or defiant acceptance. I convened the podcast's clever people and was astonished at the breadth of reference points that they shared with me. An enormous amount of work goes into this project that would simply not have been possible without its paying supporters. As a thank you, each week after an episode, we'll now offer a live online event for you, a Zoom session in which you get to quiz both me and the show's experts on any aspect of the topic that tickles you. The next live Q&A on Sisyphus and the story time before it on Arachne, the spider weaver, will be on Thursday, the 4th of June. You will also receive an illustrated guide to each topic with a lot of the art we discuss, links to the music, interesting essays, book and film recommendations, and occasional surprises. To get all of this, log on to ko-fi.com/podyssey and become a monthly subscriber for as little as £5, making sure the system has the right contact email for you. If you cannot afford to subscribe, or you cannot make a particular live Q&A, don't worry. Each of those sessions will be released as a bonus audio episode a few days later.
Come away, death, and inside the cypress let me be laid.
It is somehow perfectly elegant that this episode was impossible to put together. Every time I felt the rock was finally at the top, it would roll back down again. This, of course, goes with the territory of trying to match wits with the greatest minds that have written volumes on Sisyphus from a philosophical perspective. So I decided in the end that I wouldn't do that.
Of white stuck all with you. Oh, prepare it.
Because what was striking was how little exploration of the actual myth there was, of his reasons, his motivations, his ultimate objective. Most treatises on the subject, monstrously clever as they are, appeared to me to only be interested in his punishment, in the symbolism of pushing that rock endlessly up the slope. Very few stop to consider the truth of that premise, handed to them by others, that it is a punishment.
On my black coffin let there be straw.
Just like Pandora and her box, Sisyphus has been reduced to his encounter with that boulder, the rest of his story fading into vagueness. Unlike Pandora, however, on whom a jar and eventually that box was imposed long after the myth began, Sisyphus has been depicted with his rock from the very, very start. I spoke to archaeologist Alexandra Angeletaki-Rö.
One of the best-known ancient depictions of Sisyphus comes from an Attic black figure neck amphora attributed to Achelo's painter, today at the State Museum in Munich. The vase shows Sisyphus in the underworld condemned to push his rock up the hill, flanked by Hades and Persephone, witnessing his punishment. This iconic scene dramatizes the eternal labor of the myth in a visually powerful way. Sisyphus strains upwards while Hades and Persephone stand nearby, silent witnesses to a justice that cannot be appealed. In this story, the underworld is orderly, ruled, and absolute. On Apulian red figure vases from southern Italy, the scene unfolds again during Hercules' descent to Hades. One of the Rene's Furies lashes Sisyphus as he wrestles with his stone, pain and repetition locked together. Each depiction fixes the moment of punishment, freezing the eternal cycle in clay and paint.
This is one of the most important aspects of the myth, and one that puts it in its historical context. The myth is, it seems to me, first and foremost about rules, their enforcement, and how to deal with breaches. The myth is about the law. This depiction extends into more recent art. Cultural historian Debbie Chalice told me about one of the most famous and most striking depictions by Titian.
There are two fragments of plays on Sisyphus by Aeschylus. Sisyphus the Runaway, so about him sort of cheating death, and then Sisyphus the Stone Roller, so about his punishment. So in some ways there are a bit of echoes of Prometheus there, but there's not loads of depictions of him across art and literature. And certainly in the modern world, the main one, and it is an amazing painting by Titian, which is in the Prado, part of a series of people who have eternal suffering. So you also have Tantalus depicted, Titius, whose liver was devoured by a vulture, Ixion, who tried to seduce Juno. So it's part of a whole series that he does. That's from Ovid's Metamorphosis, that depiction, and is of Sisyphus carrying the boulder, not rolling it, but carrying it. He's an older man and he's sort of in this horrific terrain with a beast behind him looking very wild. And he's muscly and sinewy and bowed down by this burden that he's carrying. So there's a muscularity to Sisyphus in this picture that shows work. You know, this is not a Jim Tones bunny. This is a man who's been working. The muscles are sinewy. They are used of manual labour, and there's fire all around him and smoke. But behind that, it looks like he's almost in a volcano. It's not just a hill. You know, this is manual labour in fire, in horrific conditions. For all of his muscles, he's bowed down, he's older, but there's a vulnerability about him. There's a vulnerability here that really shows you he's being punished.
This leads us usefully to the subject of Tartarus, the place where the worst of the worst are sent to atone for their crimes eternally. Because you see, if the myth is to serve as a cautionary tale that says you may get away with breaking the rules for a while, but eventually you will pay for it, there is a big flaw it must overcome: lived experience. We all know and can see people who break the rules and do not pay for it. What is needed, then, is an extra layer of protection. Some rules are not just human, they are higher than that. They are part of a divine order. They are monitored metaphysically, not just in this life, but the next one. Essentially, what we are witnessing is the birth of the idea of a final judgment.
In early versions of ancient cosmology, Tartarus is not just a place, but a primordial god like Gaia, an embodiment of depth below the world as we know it, even Hades. There are various possibilities of eternity for the soul. Elysium represents the elevation of excellence. Hades is the oblivion for most mortals, a sort of nothingness. Tartarus, in contrast, is the place where the Titans are banished after the Titanomachy, the container for not just death but chaos. These deepest recesses of the universe are reserved for only a handful of the worst, those who deserve not to be rewarded, not even to be forgotten, but to be punished eternally. Later, Plato develops this notion in Gorgias, expands it, articulates early ideas of the soul being judged at the point of death. And if Elysium represents an early version of paradise, then Tartarus is a rough draft of hell.
This higher law, of course, cannot apply to anything, or Tartarus would be a very busy place full of people who fart in elevators or jump queues. To illustrate this, the myth must contain three important elements: hubris, the behavior mocks the divine order; recidivism, the behavior is not a one-off; and impact, the behavior has catastrophic consequences. This is where the episode of Sisyphus taking Thanatos hostage, meaning that nobody else can die, is a vitally important part of the story, because it says, what if everyone acted the way you do? What if everyone broke the rules? Not for the first time, Xena, warrior princess, rides to the rescue as one of the very few tellings that, despite messing with the story, successfully intuits its real core. And there is only one person that can tell me about that, expert of the intersection of classics and pop culture, Amanda Potter.
Sisyphus appears as a character in Xena Warrior Princess and Hercules the Legendary Journeys as a trickster king of Corinth. Here, he is detached from his rock, but he is the person who tries to trick Death. He first appears in Xena in an episode called Death in Chains, where he captures Death, who's personified by the female character Celesta, who's the sister of Hades. She's come to take him to the underworld, but he doesn't want to go. It turns out that he's marked for death because his people needed water and he helped them, angering Zeus, which sounds like a Prometheus-type problem. He's helped mankind and Zeus wants to punish him. However, he won't have this and he traps Death, but then sick people around the world are unable to die. Hades asks the hero Xena to help release Celesta because of all the trouble that Sisyphus has caused, and eventually Sisyphus learns that he shouldn't be causing such suffering and he shouldn't be afraid of death himself. So he helps by releasing Celesta and things go back to the natural order. However, they only do this for a time. In later episodes, he manages to get out of the underworld using his trickery again, and it takes the heroes, Xena and Hercules, to put him back in his place again in the underworld.
Understanding the crime in this way is key to assessing the sentence. Effectively, what the gods say to Sisyphus is, fine, you want more life? We are going to give you all the life you can handle. In Janacek's opera The Macropulos Affair, the central character, Emilia Marti, is searching for the formula to an elixir that extends life and youth. Nobody believes her until it is revealed that she is actually centuries old and has lived under a series of identities. It is only when she finally acquires the formula, when she gets her boulder to the top of her mountain, her obsessive quest having come to an end, that she realizes it was the only thing that kept her going. It's a great mistake to live so long, she says, explaining that it is the possibility of death that attaches one to life, gives meaning to love, virtue, progress. The piece of paper with the formula on it is set alight and Emilia dies, but the musical motif is of elation. This is a theme we see in countless aspects of our storytelling and is especially useful in less religiously ordered settings, where it becomes a form of be careful what you wish for. From the creature in Frankenstein and Louis in Interview with a Vampire, to Connor MacLeod in Highlander, Helen and Maddie in Death Becomes Her, and Deadpool. Eternity is often its own punishment.
We might think about the inability for us to trick death. Actually, if our card's marked, then we have to go. And the best example in film series is the Final Destination movie franchise. In the first film in the franchise, student Alex Brown has a premonition that a plane is going to explode, killing all on board, including Alex. Along with some other passengers, Alex doesn't board the plane, and these people are saved from the explosion that ensues. However, death has them in his or her sights, and they die one by one in a series of bizarre accidents. The story is repeated in all the sequels to the film. For example, a car crash or a building collapsing, where the premonition allows this to be avoided, only to be replaced by subsequent horrific deaths for all the characters who escaped death in the first place.
It is in the endless repetition of the task that one begins to notice some striking psychological parallels. I sought the counsel of psychotherapist Dr. Ruth Smith.
What really strikes me revisiting Sisyphus is potential connection to OCD. So obsessive compulsive disorder relates to us experiencing an obsessive thought, and then we have a compulsion, usually an action, in order to assuage that thought. So, for example, the thought might be, all of my family are going to die in a horrific accident. And in order to quell that anxiety, you might perform a ritual. It might be washing your hands. It might be turning the light switch on and off a certain number of times. It might be a ritualistic cleaning, which then soothes ourselves and convinces us that the bad thing isn't going to happen. And when I think of Sisyphus's eternal pushing the rock up the hill, it kind of mirrors the compulsive rituals that people with OCD perform to neutralise their intrusive thoughts. However, these repetitive acts, they only provide a sort of a transient relief. So you need to keep doing them in order to get the sense of calm that you're seeking from that ritual. So it's a structure that is central to the clinical descriptions of OCD: the intrusive thought, the anxiety, the ritual, the temporary relief, and then the reoccurrence of the intrusive thought. And I think Sisyphus's anxiety is about being mortal, unlike his wife. And therefore, there might be something actually strangely soothing in pushing the rock up the hill. It's not the punishment that perhaps the gods intended it to be, actually. It's a way of quelling that anxiety about his own mortality.
Throughout this episode, one question has occupied my thoughts. Why? Why keep going? What happens if he stops pushing? Is this a magical punishment which compels its criminal? Or does Sisyphus choose to continue to push? If the first, then we are in the general area of a labour camp. It is a method of exercising control. Two of the most celebrated plays about courage in adversity involve two pairs of prisoners in labour camps, and their respective Sisyphean tasks seem no coincidence. In apartheid-era play The Island, the two prisoners, one of which is a thinly disguised Nelson Mandela, carry sand back and forth all day, each pouring it on the other's pile, which ensures the task is never complete. At night, they rehearse a prison production of Antigone by Sophocles, a play about the rigidity of laws and the cruelty of punishment. In Martin Sherman's Bent, two homosexual men in a Nazi concentration camp carry rocks from one side of the yard to the other. When their task is finally complete, they are ordered to carry them all back to their original location. Recently, Sherman told the excellent Show People podcast that one of the core ideas in the play is precisely the grinding psychological control exercised by being forced to do something physically pointless. If, however, Sisyphus chooses to continue pushing, we might be in a different area altogether.
Adjacent to the potentially sort of OCD-like behaviours is that I think that the task of pushing the rock up the hill in perpetuity could also be seen as a sort of a defence mechanism. A defence mechanism sort of serves as an impulse or an emotion where we displace what we're feeling, so for example our anxiety, and we redirect it from its original threatening object. So for Sisyphus it would be mortality, and we find a safer substitute. He moves from the purpose of cheating death to moving the rock. Yes, this task has been imposed on him. It's not one that he's chosen himself. But I think that he finds comfort in it potentially. We do this all the time in our own lives. Think of that important work assignment that we have to get done, or we've got to go and visit that relative who's really tricky, and we avoid and we avoid and we avoid, but we find something else to fill our time with. So when I was doing my PhD, if I was getting stuck and had a bit of writer's block, all of a sudden housework seemed really appealing, and I'd rather do that than sit down and work on the thesis. And we all do this in our lives in multiple different ways. It's a self-protective avoidance technique where we seek to insulate ourselves from something that we think we're going to find difficult, either emotionally or practically. And so in this way, Sisyphus is replicating the notion of a defense mechanism. The rock in itself is acting as a distraction from his own mortality, but also potentially a self-soothing activity.
What is interesting is that if one follows these two very distinct possibilities, coerced to push or choosing to push, they actually lead to a very similar place, just like they did in Bent. In both scenarios, the physical toll of the task is an expression of corporeal life. Whether by willing embrace or stubborn perseverance, Sisyphus clings to life by clinging to that rock. This is what Albert Camus essentially means when he writes, "The struggle itself toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. One must imagine Sisyphus happy."
I think it's really interesting that Sisyphus comes up in the 20th century mainly. You'd think that he might come up during the Industrial Revolution, the idea of unending work, of unending labour, and also brutal conditions. But it's really Camus who's The Myth of Sisyphus, or an essay on the absurd, which is published in 1942 in French, then later translated into English with a preface by Camus in 1955. That preface contextualises its writing within the catastrophe of France and Europe. So, of course, 42, France has capitulated to the Germans. There is no France in the same way that Camus would have seen France. This links in some ways to the Europa myth, the idea that there isn't a Europe, that Europe has been overrun by forces that are not civilized, that don't represent European values. So he argues that the ultimate philosophical question is, why do we choose to live? And I think we have to understand that question, because it may sound beyond morbid within the context of 1942, because many people did commit suicide rather than give in to the Nazis, rather than be rounded up and taken away anyway, if you were Jewish, for example, or if you were gay. So this is a kind of question that he poses, and he says that the ultimate response to this is Sisyphus chooses life. So he cheats death twice, and he still cheats death. There's some versions of the myth where he cheats it again, and other versions he gives water to Corinth, and arguably that's still about life. And the subtitle, Essay on the Absurd, linking into the surrealist movement, ideas around folklore and theories of the absurd at the time, we are in essence ridiculous. But we can often think about big ideas and moments of absurdity. This is what Camus argues. And he says there's an awakening, because you can see the absurdity of everything. So there's arguably a sort of matrix, red pill, blue pill juxtaposition going on here. Is it better to exist and know the meaning of the absurd, or is it better to not know? My take on reading Camus seemed to be that awakening meant understanding Kierkegaard, because there's a lot of Kierkegaard in this. There's also quite a lot of assumptions of work patterns following a post-industrial revolution model, 8-9 hours a day. And he argues, and this is the big thing, that Sisyphus, the rock is his thing, and he always has something to do. So his priorities is a sense of hope.
Now, this may be the strangest sentence I have ever committed to record, but I think Al Bundy, in Married with Children, explains absurdist existentialism best.
So you think I'm a loser? Just because I have a stinking job that I hate? A family that doesn't respect me? A whole city that curses the day I was born? Well, that may mean loser to you, but let me tell you something. Every morning when I wake up, I know it's not going to get any better until I go back to sleep again. I'll never play football like I thought I would. I'll never know the touch of a beautiful woman. But I'm not a loser. Because despite it all, me and every other guy who will never be what he wanted to be are still out there being what we don't want to be 40 hours a week for life. And the fact that I haven't put a gun in my mouth makes me a winner.
Everyone gets into a dull routine if they don't get a chance to change the scene. I could not be wearier, life could not be drearier if I lived in Siberia. I'll tell you what I
This repetitive, futile drudgery, however, can be found in every punishment of Tartarus, and yet they are all different. As I remind you on a regular basis, in a lean constructed narrative like a myth or a folk tale, filtered and filleted over centuries, every element has meaning.
monotonous, monotonous.
Each monotony has a distinct, deliberate flavour. There is a reason the Danaids are made to pour water into an unfillable pool. There is a reason Tantalus is teased with food he can never consume. Just so with Sisyphus, there is a reason for the physicality of the task, the hill, the rock, the depiction of existence as a literal uphill struggle. All shall be revealed in the final part.
Monotonous, monotonous. Dum 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 dum. Love to hear you say you love me a little bit. Say it over and over, monotonous, ain't it?
So why a big rock up a mountain? The answer is in the sin committed by Sisyphus. That sin is not trying to cheat death, trying to upend the natural order. His sin is succeeding. His crime is that he outthinks the gods again and again. And if you want confirmation that this myth is, at least in part, about being too clever for one's own good, let me give you two pieces of information I have been wickedly withholding.
That's a picture, it'll take forever to paint it. It's monotonous, ain't it?
Sisyphus is the second of three mythological characters regularly described as the craftiest of men or trixiest of men in many ancient Greek sources. The first is Prometheus, who, according to several mythological genealogies, was the great-great-grandfather of Sisyphus. The third is the illegitimate son of Sisyphus, the product of that one night he spent with Autolycus, the cattle thief's daughter, Anticlea. Remember, the one who was just about to marry King Laertes. Several plays and other literary sources openly assert that Sisyphus was the true biological father of Odysseus. Three tricksters who outwitted the gods on several occasions and were punished for it.
Through depictions and stories, Sisyphus becomes more than a single condemned soul. He embodies a type of myth that explains humanity's place in the cosmos. The boundary between life and death was as immovable as the stone he pushes forever upwards. In this ritual imagination, the myth explains the world as much as it narrates it. Before philosophers read Sisyphus as a figure of existential nature, his story answered the fundamental questions that humans are tormented by: why death is final, why the gods must be obeyed, and why human cunning, however brilliant, ultimately fails against divine order. It is a narrative shaped by ancient ritual memory and Bronze Age experience, where order mattered and transgression had consequences. This fundamental transition to rule-based societies rather than law of strength is mirrored when it comes to Apollo, the one that punishes whoever does not commit to these rules. He himself, when he killed the python, went back to purify himself because there's a rule about killing. These were truths enacted and reinforced in rites of passage, funerary practices, and stories told in sacred contexts where balance between gods, humans, and the cosmos had to be continually affirmed.
If this transition from brute strength as the final arbiter of right and wrong to agreed norms as a framework for prosperity, rules are not a puzzle to be solved or an opponent to be outwitted. This might be why Sisyphus is given a physical puzzle that he cannot solve. He is given an opponent that he cannot outwit, that most basic of laws, gravity.
It is important to understand that with practical change comes societal change. There is gradual swinging of the pendulum from a society in which might is right and only what is possible limits what is done, to rule-bound societies with orders from the gods, as interpreted by the state, giving whole groups a guide on how to act collectively, and gradually moving towards individuals that increasingly experience themselves as responsible for their own thoughts and decisions, and even feelings, like the lyric poet Archilochos from Paros at the 7th century BC. He introduces us to the emotional life which occurs within the individual rather than being imposed from outside. This way, the evolution of Greek myths should be put in a wider framework of a development of consciousness, from mere survival to shared order, to the discovery of the inner self, capable of reflection, choice, and moral awareness. There is still a respected school of interpreting myth as literary texts, with scholars like Snell and Nielsen. Modern researchers, however, are far more cautious. They emphasize that myths are literary and performative constructions, shaped by historical context rather than straightforward windows into a unified Greek mind.
This link between meaningless repetitive activity and the absurd is one that is underlined with almost Sisyphean regularity in many works that probe the futility of life. A boulder is central to the pointless activity in Beckett's Waiting for Godot. In Happy Days, Winnie is slowly becoming part of a monolith. In Endgame, the servant Clov spends most of the play moving a ladder between two small windows, climbing up and down in order to look through them at something unnamed and irrelevant. The characters in Ionesco's Their Chairs keep rearranging them for guests that exist only in their heads. In Shepard's The Rock Garden, the characters keep falling off their chairs while talking about a rock garden, and in Pinter's The Dumb Waiter, orders keep being delivered to a place with no food. The brilliant opening sequence in Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times sees an order arrive to a control room somewhere where a lever is pulled, increasing the pace of a factory assembly line to such an extent that it swallows our everyman hero. None of these characters seem to know why they are where they are, or why some external force is dictating their physical activity. In this context, the boulder also begins to make sense. Round shapes have no beginning and end. Their construction is inscrutable. They offer no clues or clever angles. They are just there.
When we think of Sisyphus, we often think of him with his rock. And there are a number of representations of the rock across different media. In the 1960s television series, The Prisoner, Patrick McGoohan stars as Number 6. He's an ex-intelligence agent who's imprisoned in a strange village. It's called simply The Village, and he's trying to escape this village, but he's chased by a massive white ball known as Rover. Number 6, like Sisyphus, is being controlled by a higher power, and the method of control is the ball. He'll never escape, and neither he nor we can really understand why, but the ball is always there.
In the brilliant Daniels film Everything Everywhere All at Once, the mother-daughter characters actually exist in one reality as boulders on top of a mountain, and the futility of life is symbolized by a perfectly round, rotating, everything bagel.
What is that? I got bored one day, and I put everything on a bagel. Everything. All my hopes and dreams, my old report cards, every breed of dog, every last personal ad on Craigslist. Sesame, poppy seed, salt. And it collapsed in on itself. Because you see, when you really put everything on a bagel, it becomes this. Come on, Evelyn. The truth.
What is the truth?
Nothing matters.
No, Joy. You don't believe that?
Feels nice, doesn't it?
But the material holds clues as much as the shape, the weight, the solidity, the impenetrable permanence.
I found it really hard to get a handle on this, if I'm honest. I'm not massively into existentialism, partly because I feel like it's all been said before, but I suppose that's the joke of it. But then I went to an exhibition, and I was lucky enough to be in Venice, and I went to the Guggenheim, and there was this exhibition, Manufacture, the ceramics of Lucio Fontana. And I'd heard of the artist, but I'd never seen the work before. Yeah, and this is Fontana, who worked in Italy during Mussolini, actually made a sculpture of Mussolini. It was very ambiguous, ambivalent about fascism. He did a depiction of Mussolini as kind of Caesar, but it's not a particularly flattering portrait, and there's a sense of violence around it. So he's working within the conditions of fascist Italy. And in that exhibition, I had just read Camus, and there were a lot of ceramic depictions of the crucifixion, and they were beautiful, actually. It's not like a traditional crucifixion, the kind of shapes there, but it's almost like you can feel the emotion rather than rippling through a tortured naked body. It's rippling through clay, it's rippling through ceramics and all the creases. And the quote that really brought this to me was from Fontana from 1947. He says, "Between suicide and travel, I chose the latter because I hope to still make a series of ceramics and sculptures that give me the pleasure or feeling of still being a living man." And I read that quote and I thought, that's it, that's Camus, that's Sisyphus. That thing of being a living man because you're still rolling that boulder. You've still got something else to look forward to. You've still got something else to do. You have a purpose. You've still got this higher thing to go to. Then I walked into this next room in the Guggenheim, and there were these beautiful, massive clay spheres with handprints all over them from where the artist had made them. To me, that was a kind of material embodiment of the purpose of an artist, of what this means, the purpose of a life's work, this idea that you don't want to give up no matter how bad things are around you. There's other depictions like this. There's one by Franz West from 2018 in which there's these huge papier-mâché sculptures called Sisyphus, and they're clearly about this boulder. There's a sense, again, a bit like Pandora's jar or box. The rock almost becomes more important than the man because it's a sense of purpose.
So is the boulder legacy? Is that what animates Sisyphus? Is it a life's work that never quite makes it to where we want, however hard we push? Is it reputation that people strain to build for a lifetime only to see it all too often tumble back down the mountain in an instant? German Jewish philosopher Walter Benjamin carried a heavy black suitcase up the Pyrenees, fleeing Nazi-occupied France. It contained what he described as his most important manuscript, his legacy. The suitcase was lost, and Benjamin killed himself. How often do we hear the term Sisyphean task not associated with someone's work? and how often is it used in relation to women?
Looking at Sisyphus through the gendered lens and the idea that perhaps men like to leave behind some sort of legacy, that they like to have something concrete and tangible to sort of almost write in the books of history, I was here, I was important, I belonged, in a way that I don't think women necessarily do, or women tend to do in a different way. So men tend to want to build buildings or have statues or have bridges or even their work, whereas historically that option hasn't been open to women. And I don't know whether it's necessarily that women don't want those things, but it's not been modelled for us. Historically, there hasn't been a precedent for women to have the sort of legacy that men have been told that they ought to try to achieve. And so I think women tend to leave their legacy in their relationships. And if we think about men wanting to leave a legacy that's perhaps very concrete, literally concrete, you can't get anything more tangible and solid and hard as rock. And so I wonder if there is some sort of echo that the Greeks were able to identify, that man may find comfort and meaning in something solid and tangible, whereas because women haven't had that option open to them historically, that we find it in our relationships. Our legacy as women, therefore, is often absent from the history books versus men's legacy, which is writ large in concrete and stone.
Sisyphus's relationship with his wife Merope is largely unexplored in relation to his punishment, but it seems to me significant that she was immortal and he wasn't. He was a king, and still she sacrificed status to be with him. He was beneath her. What does that do to an already ambitious, arrogant man?
Sisyphus' wife was Merope, who's known as the Lost Pleiad. And again, this tale is told by Ovid in the Fasti, one of the stars in the sky. And she's lost because she marries a mortal. So this in itself, this idea of Sisyphus wanting to cheat death again and again, that is a good motivating factor. But the reason she's known as the Lost Pleiad in the sky is because she doesn't burn as brightly. She doesn't shine as brightly. So she's the kind of the end of her sisters who shine brightly, and she's the one who doesn't. There's a poet called Felicia Hemans, who was a really big poet in her day, in the sort of 1820s, 30s. And she writes a poem called The Lost Pleiad. She takes a line from Byron, like the Lost Pleiad seen no more below. And she talks about half the night lost a gem, the regal night, she wears her crown of old magnificent, though thou art exiled thence. And she really takes her story, and she has a sympathy with Merope. She says heaven shines not the less for that one vanished star, but she talks about her banishment and the idea that Merope is immortal. She's got that forever and ever and ever. So it's almost like she's got the same punishment as Sisyphus. She'll never be able to burn so brightly because she's been vanished. I think that's an interesting take on Sisyphus, both for motivation, but also there's another side of this. There's also a star that burns less brightly.
And it is in truth only after one begins to notice the macho quality of Sisyphus pushing that rock up a mountain, the steroid strongman tint of it, that he may not always emerge as a tragic figure.
In the animated Ice Age films, Scrat, the long-snouted saber-toothed squirrel, is chasing an acorn that he never manages to either obtain or eat. Oblivious to what's going on in the rest of the world, his sole purpose is to capture this acorn, so that it's more important to him than a potential mate, it's more important to him than all the disasters that happen around it. So he causes an avalanche and a flood, an eruption of a volcano, and the continental drift, but continually he's still going after that acorn. The forerunners of Scrat and the acorn are Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner. These are cartoon characters that first appeared in the late 1940s. Wile E. Coyote is constantly aiming to catch and eat the Roadrunner bird and comes up with many ingenious ways to catch him, but he never manages to do this, is constantly thwarted and injured in many different ways. Instead of thinking of Sisyphus as a tragic character, we might think of Sisyphus as an absurd character and the absurdity of life whereby we never get what we want. And we could laugh at him because actually rolling a rock up a hill, constantly going after an acorn or a roadrunner bird is just so funny and absurd. There's a short scene on YouTube created as a finale for Blue Sky Studios in 2022. Scrap is finally allowed to eat his acorn. This was the end of the series and he's allowed to get his reward.
Carol Ann Duffy's poem, Mrs. Sisyphus, opens, "That's him, pushing the stone up the hill, the jerk," and closes with, "But I lie alone in the dark, feeling like Noah's wife did when he hammered away at the ark, while, up on the deepening murk of the hill, he is giving 100% and more to his work." Some modern depictions go even further than absurdity and recognize that occasionally Sisyphus can even be ridiculous.
One of the most bizarre representations of Sisyphus is in the video game Hades. He's a non-playable character, so an NPC, and he helps the player character Zagreus, who is attempting to escape the underworld. He's a good character in this way that he's helping the protagonist, and he's memorized a map of Hades, which is really helpful to Zagreus. He's become a good person through his punishment. However, he might also be completely crazy because he's so aligned to his rock now that he's befriended it. So Baldy is now his best friend, and he won't leave Hades even when Zagreus offers him freedom because he can't leave his good friend Baldy behind.
Free from the preconception that this must be an important cosmic tale about the human condition, one begins to question Camus' earnest existentialism. Physical activity, especially repetitive physical activity, can take clever people out of their head, providing respite from the internal monologue that tends to overanalyze everything into ultimately a problem. It doesn't follow that the assembly line worker or supermarket shelf stacker is deliriously happy all the time. This is a sentiment that one hears only from people who do not do manual work and imagine what it might be like, from intellectuals who imagine the joy of not being quite as clever as they are. But it is condescending. Factory workers and shelf stackers are perfectly capable of complex inner monologues and existential anxiety, and many dream, I am sure, how deliriously happy they would be to sit on their arse all day and ponder life. Just like Giuseppe Verdi imagines metalwork to be a jolly, music-making endeavour in his opera Il Trovatore. Verdi's gypsy blacksmiths must be the first manual labourers in existence that work by a fire in a fort and wish for a hot sunny day. But none of it matters, you see, because manual toil allows them the freedom to think of other things, like beautiful women. One cannot help but feel a sense of suspicion that Camus' take on repetitive manual labour may be as much a soothing mechanism as it is a reality. I put his version of Sisyphus to a dear friend. I said to her, "Don't you think there is contentment in having a clear goal and knowing you will never run out of work?" Her response was, "That would involve pushing a boulder up an endless mountain, not up the same bit every time." She's right, of course. Actually, when I think of Sisyphus, the physical exertion and effort to go from A back to A, the image that springs to mind is not of brickies or assembly line workers. They are building something. It is the image of office workers at the gym, on bicycles, running corridors and cross-trainers that go nowhere. They find physical activity gratifying because it is missing from their life, in the same way that builders might find putting their feet up delightful.
It could be argued that sort of the trend for looks maxing or lots of cosmetic procedures is a way of avoiding and distancing oneself from the reality of aging and death. And we've gone as a society from seeing aging as a privilege and a gift to something that we need to hold off and keep at a distance. Age is a proxy for death in this scenario. So in a way, it's its own Sisyphean task of trying to stay young according to what society at that particular point views as youthful and beautiful, when actually what is more freeing is to embrace aging and to embrace the gift of it and accepting it. And as part of that is accepting that what comes at the end of the aging process, if we're lucky enough to get old, which is death. And I think perhaps the trend for, say, biohacking, these people who want to live forever and be as young as possible, I think it probably stems from an inner anxiety about what it would mean to be old or ill. And I think that's because our society doesn't place value on age. And that's where I would say the anxiety is rooted in.
It seems to me that perspective is key in understanding the myth. And actually, I think Camus gets that. He doesn't claim that Sisyphus is happy. He says one must imagine Sisyphus happy. It is Camus that needs to believe that for his own reasons. As our archaeologist Alexandra explained, the Sisyphus tale comes from a time of transition from collective norms to individualism. Existentialists try to interpret it firmly from inside the latter, from the point of view of self-awareness. But Sisyphus is not there yet. He's part of the journey. He's part of a whole. His goal was set for him as a corrective to his constant overreaching, deliberately out of reach. Just like modern business ethos teaches managers to constantly shift targets to stretch the workforce. Yet, this is not just occupational. At a time when we say, "I am so busy," to each other as a brag wrapped inside a complaint, in a week where the debate is all about burnout, I find myself assessing my own well-being, the amount of work I put into projects, and asking, what goals do I set for myself?
One of the things that the Sisyphean myth shows us is the human propensity to set ourselves impossible goals. We like to always be reaching for something. It gives us a fixed point in the future to work towards, and that can feel safer than an unknowing, open future ahead of us. And it can give us a sense of meaning. So if we are having some sort of existential crisis, who are we? What's our purpose? What's my life? What's death? Having a goal and something to work towards can kind of stave off that feeling, and we can find meaning and purpose in the activity, in actually reaching for the goal. And therefore, the struggle in attaining that goal in itself becomes meaningful and helps to quell the existential anxiety that we carry. However, we do tend to be over-optimistic, perhaps even overconfident, which makes us underestimate the obstacles that we may face along the way and overestimate our capabilities and capacities. So we can commit to goals in the present that when we get to a future point actually are impossible given our circumstances. And the important thing when we set ourselves goals is to be fluid, allow them to change as we go along. If we stick to a very rigid plan that we must do this in order to be a success or to have meaning, it can really affect our sense of self and our sense of purpose. And it can lead to burnout and stress and reduced well-being. Clinging to an unattainable goal is really harmful to us psychologically and potentially physically as well, and to our relationships. And so it's important when we set ourselves a goal, is it a possible or impossible one? Can I be flexible? Am I not going to be flexible? If so, what will that mean for myself and for others around me? Sometimes there is an argument that we set ourselves impossible goals because unconsciously we are setting out to prove to ourselves that we're not good enough, we're not capable, we're not worthy. It's a way of affirming a negative self-belief that we have about ourselves.
Camus assumes that Sisyphus must know by now that his task is hopeless and has found happiness in resigning to the meaningless absurdity of life, that he is Weatherman Phil Connors 2/3 through the film Groundhog Day.
Did you sleep well, Mr. Connors?
Did I sleep well?
Would you like some coffee?
Yes, please. I think I'll have a double.
I hope you enjoy the festivities. There's talk of a blizzard.
Do you ever have deja vu, Mrs. Lancaster?
I don't think so, but I could check with the kitchen.
Connors goes through denial, nihilism, and depression inside his endless loop. He finds contentment and even joy when he accepts that all he can do is improve each repetition. So what is it that separates Sisyphus from Phil Connors, other than a happy ending? Might Sisyphus not, one day, out of the blue, solve the puzzle? His story has not ended. That is explicit. It goes on. Sisyphus, just like he wanted, finds immortality. He gets unlimited lives to replay this level. This makes Tartarus not hell, but purgatory. And that connection between trickster gods and cheating death is not accidental. It is found in every culture. Those rituals still carry on today, including in Greece, in carnival traditions, which are symbolically about the tricking and cheating of death. A defiant celebration of life in the middle of winter that pushes that rock up the hill, not in resigned contentment, but in hopeful defiance.
There's an old man called Mississippi. That's the old man that I wants to be. What does he care?
Maybe Sisyphus is a reminder that our time is not unlimited, that it is too short for unreachable goals. Maybe propping the boulder 95% of the way up is good enough when you don't have infinity. And even as I say these words quite exhausted, I know precisely what my boulder is. My need for approval, a competitive compulsion to excel, perfectionism. I was going to say the unhealthy kind, but actually there is only the unhealthy kind.
He don't plant taters, he don't plant cotton, and them that plants them is...
That's the peak. The boulder will roll down. Nothing is perfect. Nothing needs to be. Nothing should be. The trick is to get just as close as one can without wasting one's life.
You and me, we sweat and strain, body all...
In his recent book, The Evolving Brain, Dr. Paul Goldsmith writes that our intellects are not wired for contentment, but for tenacity. Maybe that is the bit of neuroscience that Camus was missing. Sisyphus does not know he is beaten. Everything we know about Sisyphus, actually about humans, seems to say to me that he is convinced he will get that rock to the top tomorrow. And so there is no question, Sisyphus is happy because he's doing what he loves, pushing a self-inflicted boulder up an impossible mountain. The only question that matters is what boulder are you pushing, and does it make you happy? Podyssey is an audio production for Cooler Heads, written and presented by me, Alex Andreou. For an illustrated guide and an invite to the live Q&A for each episode, sign up now at ko-fi.com/podyssey. Creative input, sage advice and expert contributions by 4 goddesses who inexplicably continue to make time for this hapless bard: Alexandra Angeletaki-Rö, Debbie Chalice, Amanda Potter and Dr. Ruth Smith. Music by Mariana Sangita, artwork by Simona Canelu, additional research by Cosman Zakos. Alexandreou's Podyssey is a Cooler Heads podcast.